Hello guys, welcome to a new edition of React Today as part of the Worldswell project. What has been happening the last 7 days is nothing but worsening the realities of our world. Donald Trump is saying that there's going to be a third world war before the end of this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is the fact, because now that Israel is going down little by little and in the front lines, is being attacked and their soldiers, the special forces, are being decimated big time. It is impossible for us, the country and the world, to know what will be the numbers in terms of the special forces and soldiers that have been killed by the resistant movement Hezbollah in Lebanon. And at the same time, Israel keeps on destroying and killing and burning alive anybody that opposes them in Gaza. It's not the first time that these images are seen by us, the country and the world.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Oxfam and over 35 other humanitarian groups have issued a dire warning about Israel's siege on northern Gaza. In a statement, the group said, quote, "The Israeli forces' assault on Gaza has escalated to a horrifying level of atrocity. Northern Gaza is being wiped off the map," they wrote. Israel's barred all food into the area while attacks on displaced people continue. Meanwhile, the Biden administration sent Israel a written warning that the U.S. may cut off military assistance if Israel does not boost humanitarian aid access to Gaza within the next 30 days. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin wrote, quote, "We're now writing to underscore the U.S. government's deep concern over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza and seek urgent and sustained actions by your government this month to reverse this trajectory," unquote. The Biden administration has continued to arm Israel despite findings by its own experts at USAID and the State Department that Israel's routinely impeded delivery of food and medicine to Gaza in violation of U.S. law. On Tuesday, State Department spokesperson Matt Miller faced numerous questions about U.S. policy. This is Reuters journalist Humaira Pamuk.
Given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem.
Other outlets have reported, but Reuters has reported all the way back in April, that officials from this department have assessed in internal memos that Israel, quote, is persistently and arbitrarily impeding aid in Gaza. So if the law is already being, if it's already doing it, why is the United States waiting?
So first of all, that is not, so we've been over this before, I know, from this podium. There are people that reach that conclusion, and there are people inside this building who reach the opposite conclusion. So I think it's important to state that for the record.
In Lebanon, Israel attacked a municipal building in the southern town of Nabatea, killing 6 people, including the town's mayor. The BBC reports the mayor and other city workers were killed while holding a meeting to discuss coordinating aid for civilians remaining in the area. Israel also bombed the village of Kana, striking a health care center and several homes, killing at least 15 people. Israel also bombed the southern suburbs of Beirut just hours after the U.S. State Department said it opposes the, quote, scope and nature of Israel's attacks on Beirut. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismisses calls for a ceasefire, the UN Refugee Agency is warning a quarter of Lebanon is now under forced evacuation orders from Israel.
Israeli airstrikes and Israeli evacuation orders continue to increase the areas impacted. So now that we have over 25% of the country under a direct Israeli military evacuation order. Just yesterday, we had another 20 villages issued with an evacuation order in the south of the country.
So when we see that the United States asked for the governments of the world to support Israel, and they're asking for all the countries in the world to support genocide. We already have spoken about the influence of Israel all around the world and how deep goes the rabbit holes goes when it comes to the influence on politicians. We're gonna see how also President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro Urrego, is being attacked, literally, in order for the government, within the government, that is the elites, the banking system, the elites of that represents everything that Israel represents nowadays, which is elites. We come from better family, we are the elect ones, we are richer than anybody else, and the money that we produce enables us to corrupt and to destroy whomever opposes us. That is the motto, and it has been since the Second World War. But it was begun, I have mentioned this, and I will keep on saying it, since the Zionist plan, because the European, in this case, the participants in the First World War needed the money in order to keep on fighting the war against the Ottoman Empire and Germany. So, we saw how the Zionists were very convenient because they were amassing fortunes after their history, which consists on the trade and the trading of gold, and in the trading of special prices, jewelry, and the monopolization of jewelry, the monopolization of the banking system, and not only that, but understanding that it will be better if you, instead of loaning money to the citizens, like any regular bank do, they will rather be making loans to the governments so they can have press, the printing press for the money itself, and not only that, but have all the guarantees necessary by the taxpayers. That means the states will then assume the debt that the banks gave the governments to go to war, to develop projects in their own country, etc. So the idea of the private enterprise and the private corporation as a citizen began since those days. Meaning that there is another kind of citizen, which is the enterprise citizens. That means that corporations and companies, big companies, will act as citizens with the same rights and freedoms of citizens, but for corporations. That means that citizens are being displaced and the power of the state will be displaced by the power of oligopolies, plutocrats, rich people, in order to invest their income or their money, their revenue, into states, so that the states will pay them back at high interest according to the interest of the owners of the bank. That will include governors, mayors, presidents of their countries, etc., in order for them to make deals in private, so that can guarantee them the interest as high as they want it, in order to be paid, so that everybody in the chain of command from the banking system on down will trickle to the participants in this corrupt system that we now know. It was the same system that was applied by the Jews with the First World War 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, 1914, 1918. So when we see all this happening, we can understand how powerful the Israeli lobby is and how powerful over the centuries this monetary system has corrupted all entities around the world, especially the banking system, the SWIFT system, which is the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, which are three different things, but they operate as one, in the sense that they call the shots and governments are not to interfere, because they are a private organization and as private citizens they can do as they wish. And that is exactly what President of Colombia is opposing to. And not only him, but BRICS is all about. BRICS is all about, which has a meeting in the next few days, it's all about letting the private enterprise to thrive, sure, but not at the expense of the citizenry or the citizenry, because that will mean inequality. That will mean that very few will have the power of above everything else and anybody else, disregarding the power of the Constitution, disregarding the power of voting and the democracy, as they have called for 2,300 years, which is death. I have said that for the last 10 years, democracy is dead. Every now and then I go give her flowers because democracy has never existed, and it will never exist. It's just yeah, it's like a myth, part of the mythology that created by the Greeks. Is there a chance for democracy to work? Sure, but in order for democracy to work, the corporations have to be destituted of their power of investing in citizens and in nations and in banking systems across the world, in every nation, in order for them to have the power to sanction it. In this case, to make a long story short, the United States has adopted that system, the banking system that the Jews use in order, the Jew banking system use in order to make sure that the guarantors are the governments. That means the taxpayer. This kind of project has taken us to where we are right now. The corruption is immense. I mean, the private corporations and the super rich have bought off all this chain of command from the president of every country, the health system as we see in the pandemic, and the banking system, the contractors, who makes the money, who are the contractors who benefit from this, what are the bank's money approved for these contractors in order for the contractors to make money, and of course, if there's a debacle and the contractors don't pay or don't finish their work, which is the case of the third world countries, and it's also now the case of the United States for the last 25 years, as reported by Ben Norton, one of my favorite journalists of our time, and how the infrastructure in the United States is falling apart. Thousands and thousands of bridges that needs to be repaired or replaced, but there's no money for them. There's 30 million people suffering starvation, hungry, and poverty in the United States. I mean, under the line of poverty, 30 million. And as you saw in the last program, Candice Williams spoke about it by saying that the problem is not only that the racism, which is what the Congress every 4 years wants to say, racism in the country. No. According to her, it's because there's no income for the parents, there's no income, there's very little education for the black people in America, and that is a fact. There's neighborhoods that have been designed since Donald Trump's father designed New York development plan for the city, in which, of course, he separated the black people from the white people and the white neighborhoods from the black neighborhoods, and Brooklyn and Harlem and all those neighborhoods that we grew up with in the days of Vietnam. Now we have to talk about from the days of Vietnam, from Vietnam to Palestine and Lebanon, and how we, the people, have always had the truth in our side, on our side, and that how we were always right. All the movement students from Vietnam to Palestine, we have always been right. The point is that history don't want to give us that opportunity to be right, but we were right. As you can see, my video from Vietnam to Palestine, you can see, or my video, many others that speak about this issue, are very relevant nowadays, because history is happening again. In history, which is the fact that the peoples have zero importance to the elites. And why would that be? Because of what I just explained, and that is the interest of the strong, like I spoke in the last program of React Today as part of the World Wide Project. Alright, so why and how is it that England, the UK in general, the European Union, North America, that is the United States, and Canada, are so embedded with the banking system in the Jewish state, in this case the oligarchies of Israel, especially after the First World War, because they became richer than before after the wars, because the wars make bankers super ultra rich. So their power of influence is beyond our understanding if you don't really want to listen to what is going on. So we're going to start speaking about this in the words of somebody that I also trust, because of his research and investigation, but because it is certainly of public importance and public concern on why Israel is so powerful around the world. They use the Goebbels tactic, I say it again, that put on the others what you are doing to them. So create confusion, tell half-truths, and survive. That is the idea. But now that they have so much power and influence in the governments where people have zero value whatsoever by their senates and their politicians, because to be a senator and to be a politician or the Chamber of Representatives in the United States and Parliament here in Canada is to obey blindly to the wish and caprice of the State of Israel. So if you don't believe me, let's check some facts.
So Britain and Israel have an interesting mutual outsourcing relationship, meaning that Israel outsources certain services to the British security state and Britain outsources some to the Israelis. So, for example, Israel relies on Britain to train the Comprador Palestinian Authority, and that's carried out by private companies that are essentially outgrowths of the British Ministry of Defence and staffed by former British intelligence agents. Britain has a secret military agreement with Israel signed in 2020. We don't know the exact details of it, but actually the defence minister at the time, Ben Wallace, effectively fairly early on in the genocide in Gaza, accused Israel of committing war crimes. So you have some interesting dynamics developing in that relationship. However, in a nuts and bolts logistical sense, Britain's base in Cyprus, Akrotiri, has been the logistical hub of this war. It's only 45 minutes from Gaza, so you've had weapons flowing in there from the Germans, the Canadians, and from the Americans. Also, the British from that base launched the R1 Shadow spy plane, which goes over above Gaza. And from the beginning of the genocidal campaign, Britain has claimed that that plane is there for hostage rescue. But essentially, Israel is claiming its entire military campaign is about hostage rescue rather than genocide. And so therefore, if we analyze the R1 Shadow spy plane, one of its specialities is target acquisition. So it's therefore very likely that Britain has had a role in that somehow. We also know that from the base in Akrotiri, according to former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, the British are intercepting communications of the Palestinian and Lebanese resistance factions and sharing that information with both the US and the Israelis. We also know that Israeli military flights have landed in Britain throughout this war. We know that a small number of Israeli military personnel are also trained in this country by the British. We also know that Britain sent a spy squad to the Zionist entity to assist in the campaign in Gaza. And interestingly, early on, a story was published by the Rupert Murdoch-owned Sun newspaper, which stated that Britain had sent the SAS to Cyprus ready for mobilization in Gaza. Now, following that, the publishing of that article, the British government issued something called a D-notice, which is where it gives advice to media outlets not to publish a certain piece of information or not to publish for the interest of national security. And so the D-notice that was issued was that the British media should not publish stories about SAS activities in Gaza. Now, you would have no need for a D-notice on the issue if there was no SAS activity in Gaza. And even Jeremy Corbyn, the British Member of Parliament, asked the British Foreign Office if the SAS were active in Gaza, and his answer was he was refused, basically. So all likelihood is that Britain is directly involved on the ground in Gaza. We also know that there are perhaps hundreds of British citizens who are currently in the Israeli military, not only dual citizens with Israel, but also what they call lone soldiers. Let's not forget that Israel has 7,000 lone soldiers who are individuals that are not even Israeli citizens. What they do is they enter the Israeli military for 14 to 18 months, and then they go back to the societies that they come from with zero legal scrutiny, regardless of what they have done while with the Israeli military. So Britain is involved in a myriad of ways in what is happening there. We know when it comes to, for instance, the F-35, at least 15% of the fighter jet is manufactured in Britain. We also know that the nuts and bolts of the F-15s and F-16s also are there. For instance, in the F-16, you have the HUD technology, which allows the fighter jet to select targets. That is made by BAE Systems, a British aerospace giant, really. So there's plenty of ways in which Britain is involved. But what you also have on the domestic front is intense resistance, which actually differs from any other European country. So, for example, Palestine Action has succeeded in shutting down 3 Israeli sites in this country belonging to Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company. Firstly, Palestine Action succeeded in shutting the Elbit site in Oldham and forcing Elbit Systems to sell its subsidiary Ferranti Technologies at a loss. And that was prior to the genocide, years before it. It involved the mobilization of the local community around the factory. The next victory of Palestine Action, again prior to the start of genocide, was the shutting down permanently of the head office of Elbit Systems in London, which was in Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister's constituency. And that was, again, permanent. They vacated the premises. And the third victory, which was since the beginning of the genocide, was Elite KL, again, a subsidiary of Elbit Systems, which used to make cooling units for the Merkava tanks, which you may have seen destroyed on videos on the internet. Now, following the mobilization and relentless targeting by Palestine Action of that factory, Elbit Systems had to sell the subsidiary Elite KL at a loss. And so now that very factory produces cooling units for London transport, like buses. So while you are seeing the political class deeply enamored, and the level of integration with Israeli intelligence by the British is really very interesting. So, for example, you have something called the UK Israel Tech Hub in this country. This is an organization based in the British Embassy in the Zionist entity. But who is it staffed by? It's staffed by Israeli military and intelligence personnel. Who is it headed by? It's headed by the former director of the Israeli Ministry of Finance, a gentleman by the name of Chaim Shani. Now, this organization is funded by the British Department of Trade, by the British Ministry of Culture, but also the British Foreign Office and the British Embassy itself. And it's based in the British Embassy. But again, it's entirely staffed by former Israeli military and intelligence personnel. Now, the stated objective of this organization is to procure public sector contracts in Britain for Israeli tech companies. And so what has that led to? It's led to a situation where Celebrite, the Israeli intelligence companies, hacks phones for the British police. It's led to a situation where NICE Systems, a subsidiary of Elbit Systems, carries out investigations for the British police. So in terms of sovereignty, you have a level of integration here, which implies that Israel has a level of access which is uneven to the British system. You even have, in the case of British Telecom, which is a key part of the infrastructure in this country, its largest shareholder is Patrick Drahi, an Israeli billionaire, very close to Netanyahu, who is the owner of I-24, the Israeli media outlet, which was the first place to air the 40 beheaded babies lie, and also was found to be acting as a proxy of Benjamin Netanyahu's political movement in a Haaretz investigation. So how is it that somebody who, just to remember, when British Telecom had this shareholder takeover by Patrick Drahi, he became the largest shareholder, it caused the British government to launch a national security investigation into that. Now, what were they investigating him for? Were they investigating him because they believe that he's an asset of Israeli intelligence? I mean, his history would certainly imply such. He also owns a channel in France, which has been found to censor pro-Palestinian views. And again, I-24 is full of former Israeli military and intelligence personnel. So you have a very interesting dynamic here between Israel and Britain. Even when you look at the very company which handles the data of the British Ministry of Defence, the British Foreign Office, the British Home Office, and the NHS, it's a company by the name of Oracle. Now, who is Oracle headed by? It's headed by Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is one of, if not the largest donors to the Friends of the IDF in the history of that organization. And not only that, he is a close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, to the extent that Netanyahu was offered the directorship of Oracle. So you've got that right. The current Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was offered the directorship of the company which handles the data of the British Ministry of Defence, the British Foreign Office, and the British Home Office. It's an affront to the idea of sovereignty. But as I said, you have significant pushback within this society, including, to this day, you have 16 political prisoners in the country who have taken part, or who are alleged to have taken part, in operations to shut down Israeli arms factories. Palestine Action, since October 7th, has launched 130 operations against Israeli military sites and sites invested in the Israeli military infrastructure and companies. And in fact, since its foundation in 2020, Palestine Action has launched around 500 operations against Israeli military company sites in this country. So there is actually significant resistance against this in Britain, thankfully.
Okay, now, other thing. It's not only the SAS that is in the war in Gaza, infiltrated and committing crimes and cooperating with the Israel army, embedded with the Israel army. I'm pretty sure they're not going to have uniforms that are not from the Israeli army. They're going to wear Israeli uniforms and maybe their own flag. And how do they do that? Because these are part of the secret operations that governments like the UK, the Americans, and many others, in alliance with what is demented, always do. We see, for example, now that there's Hindus fighting for Israel against Palestinians in Gaza and now in Lebanon. And this rumor is already verified, and that is very disconcerting for some, but for me is the affirmation of what we always know, and that is that secret operations are in the hands of soldiers that are willing to give their lives in order to protect the empire. They serve to the empire and they will die for the empire, and they're trained by the empire. And some of them make fortunes and they work as mercenaries, and many others will do their job without recognition by their governments, etc. For example, I will tell you something that I know about the SAS. I had the pleasure to meet Tony May recently, and he wrote this book. Special Forces Operations Denied by the Authorities from Vietnam to the War on Terror. It's a book that you have to read. I haven't finished it yet. I just have the opportunity to start reading it, and I will appreciate if I have your attention on this matter, because it's exactly that. What we are seeing, according to the testimony of Low Key, is not invented, it's not made up, it's true. This guy is speaking about it personally after many years and experience. He is a tradesman like I am. We share the same trade. Each man was given a specific target to silently take out, and in what order. The precise time was set to execute each action. The team cocked their weapons. Everyone felt the pressure of a precision hit coming up. The helicopters began to break formation, and it appeared that they had lost control of the situation and had to regroup. That decision brought several helicopters right over the top of their position, and one of them opened fire with his belly gunner and killed 5 Australian SAS warriors who did not return fire. But the point is, guys, these special operations have always existed, so don't be surprised. The problem is to do this at the brink of a third world war is madness, and it's not gonna really help Ukraine. It's not going to help the United Kingdom. It's not going to help the United States or Canada whatsoever. And these special operations that are done in secret by the Commonwealth, directed by the United States of Israel, is going to cause a counter-attack on them. I mean, we're going to go to a Cold War and a hot war at the same time, where espionage, special operations, killings, assassinations, strategic killings, strategic assassinations all over the world are going to be the common bread of our daily news. And many of them are going to be silent or keep quiet, like Tony describes in this magnificent book, which is especially for soldiers. Whomever has served in the military will understand a little better the passion and the commitment of these people, even if they work for the wrong side. I'm anti-imperialist, period. Believe in a better America, way better America. It can have control of the world. It would have been smarter, but no, because of the ambitions of the Israeli lobby, it has become a foreign entity in their own country. America is not America. America is not for Americans. America works for Israel. Their intelligence services, their governments, their senators, 500 of them for both parties. So I invite you guys, America, this is a matter of life and death. If you don't vote for the Green Party candidate, you are doomed. They're going to bring the war home, guys. If Jill Stein wins, the possibilities of Canada, the United States, and Europe to survive an atomic hecatomb will be much higher, because what they want is to destroy the whole world. They want to assassinate as many people as possible and to create a new system with artificial intelligence, guided by artificial intelligence, and the new views for the world that Elon Musk and the super plutocrats of the world want. And we the people don't want that. We the people want to have regular lives. We the people want to have income, and we the people don't want to end up our lives after 60 and 65 in poverty. That is unacceptable. Part of my program, if you vote for me as Prime Minister of Canada, will be immediately to restore the economy of this country in all levels, and to find accountability and responsibility, and to lead the world from Canada to a better aspiration and to a better probability, because it's very probable that we can reach as a civilization that will supersede anything that we know and understand for a civilization, according to Benjamin Netanyahu. Because now that Christmas is coming, Benjamin Netanyahu, like in the days of Herodes, or King Herod, is going to believe that the three magi are bringing bad news to Netanyahu. Well, if that is the case, he's going to start killing people all around the world like he's doing, and he hasn't stopped. This regime of the State of Israel is nothing but a genocidal, demented cult that people are following blindly. And I ask from Catholics and I ask from Protestants, what is wrong with you? Don't you have a Bible? Don't you read it, what your pastors are telling you? And Jesus said it himself, check my program, Sunday Reflection, and you'll see why. Alright, these are facts. Now that you know this, you have to understand the need of the separation of church and state is the same in the separation of corporations and state. Private citizens and state. There has to be a separation, in my opinion, in these matters, because as long as the elites and the plutocrats keep on controlling foreign policy, domestic policy, democracy has been killed for decades. And as you can see, I was always right when I said that, and I still do. There's very few presidents in the global south that oppose what the United States of Israel and Israel is doing against Gaza and Lebanon. But not only that, Poland now is saying that it will attack any Russian citizens directly to St. Petersburg, is what it says. We will attack St. Petersburg directly. And that is something that we cannot tolerate, because Poland is just trying to call the influence in Europe in order to apply the Article 5. As you well know, this can explode in any of the sides, whether it's the war against Russia, using Ukraine as a bridge to burn, or whether it's the front line in Lebanon, Israel war, and Israel-Gaza occupation in Palestine. So what we are seeing in these few days is the devotees of the devil himself. Why I said the devil? Because what we saw in these images, when these boys are being burned alive after a blast of a bomb, and they haven't stopped in more than 1 year now.
Israel's intensified its ground assault on the northern Gaza Strip, where an estimated 400,000 people remain trapped amidst a dire humanitarian situation. Over the past 24 hours, Israeli attacks have killed at least 55 Palestinians, including 10 people killed by an Israeli tank shell as they lined up for food at a distribution center in Jabalia. Dozens more were wounded in the assault, children among them. On Monday, the World Health Organization began its second round of an emergency polio vaccination campaign after Israel's assault decimated Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure, prompting a polio outbreak. Parents who brought their children to receive a booster dose said they have much more to fear than the spread of disease.
Today I came to vaccinate my children against polio. We administered the first dose, and now we've administered the second dose, as we are scared of diseases that are widely spread here in Gaza. However, with disease and this fear, we fear the occupation more, because even though we are protecting them and vaccinating them, the occupation is still bombing them.
One of the victims who burned to death after Israel bombed Al-Aqsa Hospital early Monday has been identified as 19-year-old Shaban al-Dalu. He was an engineering student at Gaza's Al-Azhar University who just started his studies in September of last year. He'd built the tent shelter his family was living in when Israel bombed them. At least 4 others were also killed in the fire. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinians, including a child, and injured 4 others during an hours-long assault Monday on the city of Jenin and its refugee camp. 23-year-old Mahmoud Mamoun Abu al-Rab died of gunshot wounds, as did 17-year-old Rayan Ibrahim al-Sayed. Their killings bring the death toll from Israeli assaults on the West Bank over the past year to 755, including 165 children. In Lebanon, at least 21 people were killed Monday when Israel bombed a 4-story apartment building in the northern village of Eitu. The UN Human Rights Commission reports 12 women and 2 children were among the victims. On Monday, a top UNICEF official warned of a lost generation of children in Lebanon, with some 400,000 youths among the estimated 1.2 million displaced by Israel's bombs. This is Jalal Ferhat, a 40-year-old father of 5 whose family crossed Lebanon's border into Syria Monday seeking refuge.
There are strikes in our neighborhood and destruction, and they struck near my house. I have children. You can't just stay where you are. We tried going to another place. We moved from Baalbek, where they struck near my house. We had to leave again. I have children. You can't stay. We are going to Syria because it could be safer than where we are.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doubled down Monday in his warnings to the UN interim force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, telling UN peacekeepers to, quote, heed Israel's request and to temporarily get out of harm's way, unquote.
The charge that Israel deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is completely false. It's exactly the opposite. Israel repeatedly asked UNIFIL to get out of harm's way.
Netanyahu's remarks came after Israeli troops fired on a UNIFIL watchtower and destroyed part of a UNIFIL base near the Israeli border. At least 5 UNIFIL peacekeepers have been injured by Israel's assaults. Despite the repeated attacks, UNIFIL's chief has said peacekeepers will remain in their positions. On Monday, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy issued a joint statement calling Israel's attacks on UN peacekeepers a violation of international law. And the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, condemned Israel's attacks on UNIFIL as unacceptable.
The 27 members agreed on asking Israel to stop attacking UNIFIL. Many European members are participating in this mission. Their work is very important. It's completely unacceptable attacking United Nations troops.
The Guardian is reporting USAID officials have been holding regular meetings with Israeli counterparts at Israel's notorious Sde Teman prison since late July, after the Israeli agency overseeing aid relocated to the military base. Sde Teman has been labeled a torture camp, where Palestinians abducted by Israeli soldiers in Gaza have described harrowing physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. The Guardian says it's not clear if the USAID workers have observed the part of the base that is used as a torture camp, but affected officials told the newspaper, quote, "I can't sleep at night knowing that it's going on," unquote, and that Israel's relocation of its aid coordination group to the prison, quote, "seems like trolling," unquote.
This is demonic. I mean, this is not bad people, the good and the bad guys. This is demonic. And the fact that the United States of Israel, the Canadian government, and the European Union, all the Commonwealth countries, New Zealand, Australia, are committed to the plan of Israel, which is to destroy not only Gaza and Lebanon, but whomever opposes them in their plan to conquer the world. They already have it in their hands. In case you haven't noticed, they already have it. They control the universities' pensum, they control the presidents of the universities, the donations control the government, senators, and Chamber of Representatives. The same is happening in the UK. So when you see all these matters, and you see that Poland wants to attack Russia to St. Petersburg, even if they can, will go to war. Other countries like Hungary and now Austria are saying, okay, you know what? We are done with this crap. We are sufficiently rich. We don't need these crazy capitals to come and destroy us because of your caprice and whim. We don't want to align with the policies of the European Commission, which is not elected publicly by the people, for the people, but is bureaucratic arm of the European Union that shouldn't be making decisions. And we're going to see a little debate between Mr. Viktor Orban and Ursula von der Leyen and others that accuse Viktor Orban of being an accomplice of the Russian regime and of dictators, like they have nothing to do with dictators and oppression in their history. We can begin with the history of the British Empire and the millions and millions of people they killed over the years in manners that the Nazis imitated, and now the Jews are surpassing in imitating by burning alive kids, women, children, young people, assassinating journalists, sending messages to journalists and send them to their phones and saying, man, you keep filming, we're going to kill you, and then killing them. And now this barbarity and atrocity of demonic proportions. This is not even Holocaust. This is beyond Holocaust, in my opinion. And there's very few, but a steady march against this view of the world of capitalism, brute capitalism, as I call it. And of course, this fanaticism towards a cult that Canada has fallen in the United States, all because of the power of brute capital. Like, they are not capable of falling away or staying away from corruption, deception, war, genocide, and the destruction of the world as Donald Trump has called for it.
Of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, please take the floor.
There are still some who blame this war not on Putin's lust for power, but on Ukraine's thirst for freedom. So I want to ask them, would they ever blame the Hungarians for the Soviet invasion in 1956? Would they ever blame the Czechs or Slovaks for the Soviet repression of 1968? Would they ever blame the Lithuanians for the Soviet crackdown of 1991?
Először is tisztelt bizottsági elnök asszony, a leghatározottabban utasítom vissza, amit mondott. Minden analógia és összehasonlítás, ami magyar 56-os szabadságharcosokat veti össze Ukrajnával, tévedés és meggyalázása a magyar szabadságharcosok emlékének. Semmi közös nincsen 56-ban, meg az ukrán-orosz háborúban. Amin azért meglepődtem, az a bizottság elnök asszonyának hozzászólása, hiszen kétség kívül, hogy vannak nézetkülönbségek a bizottság elnök asszonya és Magyarország között, amiket én szándékosan nem hoztam szóba, tekintettel arra, hogy Európáért végezzük a munkánkat az elnökség keretében. És szerencsétlen dolognak tartom, amit az elnök asszony csinál, hogy a nézetkülönbségeket rávetíti az elnökségi munkára. Ez nem helyes szerintem.
Instead of looking for alternative sources, in particular, one member state just looked for alternative ways to buy fossil fuels from Russia. Russia has proven time and again it is simply not a reliable supplier. There can be no more excuses. Whoever wants European energy security first and foremost has to contribute to it. That is the rule we have to go.
A nyugati országok, önök, a háború kitörése óta 8,5 milliárd dollár értékben vásároltak török vagy indiai finomítókból valójában orosz olajat. És bennünket kritizálnak. 8,5 milliárdért. Ez hipokrácia. 23-ban önök nyugatiak 44%-kal több orosz kőolajat vásároltak, mint egy évvel korábban. Az önök cégeinek az adóbevétel, amit befizettek Oroszország költségvetésébe, az 1,7 milliárd dollár volt. És önök vádolnak bennünket orosz barátsággal? Hát önök finanszírozzák. Az igazság az, hogy nem azért jöttem ide, hogy ezeket a tényeket az önök fejére olvassam. Eszem ágába se volt. Azért jöttem, hogy bemutassam a magyar elnökség programját.
To Peter Magyar, 5 minutes.
So the other part will be that the president of Colombia, again in South America, who is the one that has got the guts with South Africa, now Austria and Europe, and Viktor Orban in Hungary. I'm not saying that Viktor Orban is the best example of democracy. Viktor Orban is racist, and even though he has different peoples of different backgrounds in his country, he hates immigrants, especially of Arab descent, Muslims, etc. And there might be reasons for that. But if they, the European Union, really want to stop immigration, instead of welcoming immigration, they should have stopped the colonization processes, but they still insist on them. The Canadian government and the Liberal Party, as well as Mr. Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, are no different. They are different faces of the same policy, which is to do as Israel wants. And that's it. That is, again, taking the governments and the democracies of the Western world to their knees. Check down Europe, for example. Europe is at the brink of extinction economically. The economy in Europe is going down fast. The industry, the car industry, for example, in Germany is falling apart. Volkswagen, who was one of the representative companies in the automotive industry, is already fell apart. And BASF, you know, the petrochemical company that we grew up with for decades, is also broke. And Mrs. van der Leyen and the German representatives to the Commission, European Commission, said that who is to be judged and separated from Europe is Mr. Viktor Orban, who now is looking for possibilities with BRICS. Europe is pushing for their own demise on the European Union. And with due reason, because they don't represent the peoples. And not only that, they're so corrupt with the money of the Israeli lobby and their other lobbies, that is oil and gas industry, etc., but especially by the influence of the United States of Israel, that other countries like Hungary, now Austria, and of course, I'm pretty sure Turkey, are positioned in the middle of the relationship between the East and Europe. The East, the Middle East, and Europe. That means that Turkey is in between the Middle East and Europe, especially Turkey, but also Austria. And we have to remember that in the First World War, with the Sykes-Picot Agreement was underrun, Austria was also one of the parties that, with Germany, was looking for independence and governance and neutrality. Germany attacked, but Austria decided to protect themselves by trying to be neutral. And they did well, but it was something that has to do with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and a lot of history behind. So they are like brothers, Hungary and Austria, in many issues historically, and yes, they're racist. They want only Caucasian people in their countries. That's understandable. If that's their policy, we have to respect their policy, because that's the way they want to be. And the European Union is not helping their cause by criticizing them personally and publicly, demonstrating the level of the debate and how the level of debate in the European Union politicians is getting even worse than in the banana republics that they critique so much not to be. The other part is that Joseph Borrell is saying that Russia cannot get away with what it's doing, that they will support Poland, that it's necessary for Europe to augment their budget for war. And now that the new president and Secretary General for NATO is saying that yes, they're going to send 40 billion euros more to the war in Ukraine. And President Biden is saying they're not going to give up Ukraine. So we have another Afghanistan, we have another Vietnam, we have another long war coming on. The problem is we cannot wait another 20 years, and especially Israel don't want to wait 20 years for the resolution of this issue. Mark my words. Any of the two, but especially Israel, will drop the first atomic bomb in order to call the attention of his partners in business, which are the United States of Israel and the European Union and the UK. That is inevitable Third World War. Not only that, the United States is going to make sure that their partners in the South are going to obey as they say, or they will also be targeted. So the conclusion is very nasty and is unavoidable. We, or the country and the world, have to get ready for the Third World War that any of these two conflicts are going to bring to the world. Now, my question is, would you vote for a conservative or a liberal that is going to take us to World War III? Or are you going to be more on your senses and use common sense, which is the less common of the senses nowadays, especially in politicians, but for us, the country and the world, and I mean Europe, the Western civilization, to take control of our government as soon as we can. Like I said, I'm running for Prime Minister. I will do some changes in this country in order to avoid the Third World War, but also to find responsibility and accountability for the politicians since the pandemic on, from the head down, and also in foreign policy when it comes to war, because we cannot just let the bombs come to Canada because we didn't do anything or anything whatsoever or something to avoid a third world conflict that is not going to leave us out of the conflagration, guys. You might say, no, we're thousands of miles away. Yeah, sure. But what you don't understand is that Russia has missiles that are 5 to 10 times the speed of sound, Mach 5 to Mach 10. And to say that the S-400s and the Patriot systems are going to be enough and fast enough to capture such a speeds, I don't think so, Pa. The government of Canada is playing with fire and is very mature and is very responsible, in my opinion, and we need a change. So, much to say, very much to say. What is your opinion on this? Please multiply these viewers. This is Army of One speaking. And if you're watching this program, this is the resistance. You are the resistance. It's not a movie, it's true. This is a well-informed resistance that is not to be treated as terrorist. Whomever, according to Canada, which has already accused a charity organization of being a terrorist organization by laundering money and redirecting the efforts of this campaign for the people in Gaza to Hamas and Hezbollah, according to the communique of the Canadian government, without proof. When you make accusations like this, you have to show proof of it. No, they just want for Canadian people to get it, swallow it, and believe that everything that the mainstream media says is true, when we already know that it's not. So we are on the crossroads right here, and the same question that I asked myself for many years, I ask myself today, and this, where is God in all of this? Because unless God wants the Third World War, because it's the description of the apocalypse, you know that Fukushima Daiichi is already leaking radioactive material into the oceans. I mean, willingly are sending tons and tons of contaminated water in those containers that are not going to hold up for very long and sending them to the bottom of the ocean. That is not a good solution. If you ask me, what Poland is trying to do is to exacerbate the intolerance for the Russians, against the Russians, through Ukraine, and using the Article 5 in order to make Europe to go to war against Russia. That is not a good idea. Europe is totally broke, regardless of what Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen and the people who applaud them in those chambers want to tell us, the country and the world. The economy of Europeans is going down big time, and by going down, I mean people have no money to pay their food, their taxes, their energy bills. But according to von der Leyen, the right thing to do, and her accolades, is to say that it's okay, that we can pay 4 times the cost of energy because we don't want them from Russia. And Mr. Orban was very clear when he said, "You hypocrite creeps. I'm here to tell you that I'm working for Europe as president of the European Union and as president of the Commission, because the president of the European Union itself is every 6 months. They change president every 6 months in order for all the members of the European Union to have a say and somehow contribute to the direction of the European Union. And Mr. Orban is against the policy of Mrs. von der Leyen and many other countries, with the exception of Hungary, with the exception of Austria, and many more are going to come to the sense and say, okay, we are doing what the United States of Israel is telling us, and it's keeping us in poverty, is devolving us to third world countries, and soon we're going to be banana republics as the one we criticize so much, and we're not going to be the guardian of the world like Mr. Borrell says, Joseph Borrell, who's asking for war and demanding war, literally, from the European countries. This kind of idiocy, supported by Angelina Melanie, on the foreign affairs of Canada. Melanie Jolie, I correct here. Melanie Jolie is demented. Of course, Mrs. Chrystia Freeland is all for the United States of Israel and Israel itself, and she's for the destruction of the world. Like, we're not going to get any damage or atomic bombs if the world starts. Now, we have to understand that not all the atomic bombs are the same as Hiroshima. They have tactical weapons that are, let's say, yes, from atomic, the chain reaction of an atomic bomb, sure. The split of the atom, sure. But they can be controlled. They cannot be as big as Hiroshima, but can be less than Hiroshima anyway. Atomic bombs are atomic bombs. They destroy hundreds of thousands of people in one blast, even if they're tactical nuclear bombs. By tactical, I mean the control explosion. It's not like the Bikini Atoll tests in 1948 and 1958, where in the Cold War the United States and Russia were testing weapons like crazy. Now we have to also understand that North Korea and Korea are in shambles. They are also about to go to war, and there's always an armistice. They were never a peace treaty between the two Koreas, and that makes us understand that there's many other aspects in this world of war that we Canadians have to take the lead. I don't agree with Hungary and their racism, of course I don't, but I agree with Viktor Orban in the sense we have to stop being captured by the interests of the United States of Israel, otherwise our economy is going to break us. And he's right. Like I said, Germany is going down big time, pretty fast. Germany is very corrupted, and if you want to talk about corruption, I have some information for you. Yep, and that information is taken from Euronews. It's a fact check. Which European country is the most corrupt? Let's go for it. This is published on 15 October 2024, just for you to know. It's October 15, 2024. The results vary depending on the metric being used and whether you're looking at the European Union or Europe as a whole. Following his speech to the European Parliament last week, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban was accused of turning Hungary into the most corrupt country in the European Union. After Orban laid out his priorities for Hungary's presidency of the European Union on Wednesday last week, Peter Magyar, an MEP and former member of the Orban's Fidesz party, who has emerged as his biggest political rival, blasted the premier for ruining the country's reputation. And I quote, "I'm happy that at least here, on behalf of the opposition and millions of Hungarians, I can ask you questions," unquote. Magyar said, addressing Orban directly. And I quote, "I hope that now you can explain to Hungarians how Hungary has gone from being a bright star to what is officially the poorest and most corrupt country in the European Union," unquote. Magyar added. The sentiment was echoed by other MEPs, such as Germany's Moritz Korner, it's very laughable, who labeled Orban as a fraud and called on him to step down. You have to see the video to believe it. But is it really true that Hungary is the most corrupt country in the European Union or even the wider continent? It depends. Hungary does consistently rank among the most corrupt European countries according to various scoreboards, but whether it's the worst country for financial crime depends on the metric being used. Transparency International's most recent corruption perception index puts Hungary squarely at the bottom of all European Union countries in corruption. On a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being highly corrupt and 100 being clean, Hungary scored 42, followed by Bulgaria with 45 and Romania with 46. This metric puts Hungary at the 76th place out of 180 countries worldwide. Transparency International slammed Hungary for over a decade of systemic breach of the rule of law, which has allowed corruption to thrive unsanctioned. It added that Hungary's attempts to silence critics reveal that Orban's government, and I quote, "commitment to protect the status quo," unquote. When you look at Europe as a whole, Russia is a country plagued by financial crime, the most according to Transparency International, scoring 26 out of 100 and placing 146 out of 180. Okay. Widespread corruption perceived in the European Union. If we change the rank system, the results change too. Eurobarometer's 2024 survey on European Union citizens' attitudes towards corruption found that 68% of Europeans consider corruption widespread in their country. Among those, Greece was perceived to have the most and the worst dirty money problem, with 98% of the citizens saying corruption was widespread there. Next came Portugal and Malta, with 96 and 95% respectively. Hungary actually came in 8th place, but a clear majority of people still consider the country corrupt. 88% perceived corruption in EU. Across the bloc, European citizens think their government isn't doing enough to address corruption. Some 65% think high-level corruption cases are not pursued well enough, and only 30% think their government efforts to combat illicit funds are effective. Some 65%. 30% think government efforts to combat illicit funds are effective, and 65% think high-level corruption cases are not pursued well enough. So as you can see, guys, the corruption is widespread everywhere around the world, but is facilitated by governments that are corrupt according to the needs of the empires. And as you saw a few minutes ago, just how influences of foreign influence in Europe, in the UK, in this case specifically as we talk today, but all around Europe is huge. So stop blaming only Orban. All of you in Europe are very corrupt. Especially policymakers, I would say. And the European Commission. So when you see this happening, when they accuse Orban of being corrupt and helping his friends, that's what Europe has been doing way more than Mr. Orban. So it's like a donkey speaking about ears, criticizing everybody else's ears and not looking at its own ears. And this policy of hide and seek from truth and reality is a game of war that is going to destroy the whole world. And I will finish with the reaction that this is going to take for us to control the world. That's why I want you to vote for me. In order to create a different Canada, a leadership in Canada that is not dependent not in the Israeli, not in the United States of Israel, not in the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. We need to evolve. We need to stop using slavery tactics centuries ago developed by the Jewish state or the Zionist state, and stop going to wars just for the resources of others. We can survive here in Canada plenty well without dependency of the OPEC or anybody else. We need certain degree of nationalism in here. That means to respect our constitution above all. The institutions have to be respected and the people in charge of institutions have to be incorruptible. That's it. Live with your salary, goddammit. We in Canada can improve our way of life. We can build housing. My proposal will be to build housing according to the income of the people, not build housing for the people that have no income to buy their houses. That's what they're doing. Again, especially when huge corporations like BlackRock and many others are buying entire neighborhoods in order to prevent you to buy or own your own house. Okay? And if you don't react today to this matter, don't tell and don't come to me saying that you were not warned, that nobody told you about. For us, for the country, for the world. Hope to see you next time in the next edition of React Today as part of the World's Weird Project. Au revoir. Bye-bye. Hasta pronto.